The morning started bright, the sunlight spilling across the polished hood of my brother's new car. It gleamed in a way that felt designed to draw attention, to announce achievement. My parents were beaming, their eyes practically lighting up with pride. Dad clapped my brother on the shoulder and said, "You're going to do great things." Words that had never once been meant for me. In the same tone, I nodded at my brother, who didn't look up from inspecting the leather interior. I forced a smile at my parents and then turned toward the pile of gifts meant for me. A stack of cleaning supplies, sponges, sprays, dusters. Mom's smile was firm, almost proud. "It's time you help around the house," she said. I remember the way everything slowed in that moment. The laughter of my brother, the clink of keys in his hand, the shine of the car reflecting back at me like a mirror. I didn't want to look into. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I couldn't explain why this stung so much, because it wasn't just about the gifts. It was about recognition, about what had never been given, about the repeated message that my worth was measured in usefulness, not celebration. So I did what I had wanted to do for years, but never allowed myself. I packed my bags. I didn't argue, I didn't explain. I moved quietly, deliberately. My parents barely noticed at first, absorbed in congratulating my brother, in posing for photos, in marveling at the car. My absence was like air, unseen but its removal already shifting the room. The drive out of town was empty. The highways stretched ahead with no one to talk to, no one to impress. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to measure my movements, my words, or my accomplishments against anyone else's. My hands rested on the wheel. I let my mind wander through years of favoritism and small humiliations, the times I'd been overlooked for praise, ignored for effort. I found a small room at a guest house on the edge of the city. Nothing luxurious, but it had privacy. It had space. It had independence. For the first night, I didn't call anyone. I didn't make announcements. I just existed in a quiet bubble, the air around me unclaimed by expectations. 2 days later, the phone rang. Once, twice, over and over. My parents frantic. "Where are you? Come back," the messages said. Each one carried the same disbelief, the same sudden panic that their carefully maintained order had slipped. They had never imagined that I would leave, and certainly never imagined I could manage outside their oversight. I didn't respond immediately. I watched the message notifications pile up, counted them like evidence, and realized something strange. The power dynamic had shifted. For the first time, they were reaching out to me on my terms, needing me to respond rather than the other way around. I thought about all the chores I had done, all the invisible labor I had carried, all the ways I had contributed without acknowledgement. I thought about the countless times I had swallowed disappointment, smiled, and conformed. And I understood that this wasn't revenge. It was simply the consequence of claiming space for myself, of stepping out of the patterns that had defined me for so long. I finally replied with a short message. "I'm fine. I'll be back when it makes sense for me." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a challenge, it wasn't an apology. It was simply a statement of presence, autonomy, and calm. My parents' panic didn't disappear overnight, but they began to notice the changes. They realized that their authority had limits, that their attention was no longer automatically theirs to command. My brother didn't understand at first. The car sat in the driveway, shiny and ignored, while I learned to manage bills, transportation, and meals on my own. Over the next week, I set routines that were invisible but solid. Independence lived in silent gestures. I registered for classes, paid for groceries, balanced small expenses, all without fanfare. Each quiet action affirmed my choice to step away from favoritism and toward autonomy. There were pangs of guilt, a whisper of longing, a fleeting hope that my parents would suddenly notice the quiet dignity in my independence. But mostly there was relief, a steady pulse of self-reliance. I could exist without constant approval. I could move without constant judgment. And in that space, I began to understand something crucial. Growth doesn't always look like applause. Sometimes it looks like packing a bag, closing a door, and driving away. Not angrily, not defiantly, but deliberately. Sometimes it looks like showing up for yourself first and letting others adjust to the new terms. When my parents called again, still anxious, I didn't panic. I didn't rush back. I simply answered calmly, setting the tone for future interactions. Their authority was still present, but the context had shifted. My independence had become undeniable, subtle but clear. I didn't go back that day, or the next. I stayed in that rented room, kept my routines, and allowed them to recognize quietly and belatedly that I was capable of more than they had acknowledged. It was not vindictive, it was not cruel, it was just firm, controlled, and undeniable. By the end of the week, the panic subsided. They didn't understand fully, but they understood enough. I wasn't their little helper anymore. I was my own person, capable of managing life on my terms. The car remained parked in the driveway, the cleaning supplies stacked nightly at home, and I learned to breathe without the weight of comparison. It wasn't a celebration, it wasn't a confrontation. It was simply recognition, a quiet realignment of balance. And for the first time, I felt free in a way that didn't require explanation or applause. Independence had arrived not with a fanfare, but in the calm of a closed door, a packed bag, and the slow realization that I could thrive outside their definitions of me. And in that calm, I knew something my parents would take longer to understand. Life is sometimes measured in the space you claim for yourself, not the space they insist you occupy.